Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling the 1990s in India. This was a decade of absolute political earthquakes. A 40-year dynasty crumbled, deep social fault lines just erupted, and a whole new political and economic order was forged right in the middle of all that chaos. So it really makes you wonder, right? How does a single political party that absolutely dominated the world's largest democracy for 40 years just suddenly lose its grip? That's the big question we're going to unpack. What exactly happened to cause such a massive, monumental shift? Well, you can trace this entire transformation back to 5, let's call them developments, that changed everything. And they all happened within just a few short years of each other. You can see them here. The end of Congress's dominance, the Mandal issue flaring up, a totally new economic direction, the Ayodhya dispute escalating, and the assassination of Rajiv Gandhi. Each one of these sent shockwaves through the system. We're going to break down exactly how each one played its part.
All right, so to make sense of all this, here's our game plan for this explainer. We'll look at the end of dominance, the Mandal's revolution, the rise of Hindutva, that new economic path, the era of coalitions, and finally, the new political consensus that emerged.
Okay, let's start with Chapter 1, the end of dominance. The first major crack in the foundation really appeared in 1989. You see, this election, it wasn't just a defeat for the ruling party. It was the beginning of the end for what political scientists call the Congress system. And just look at this chart. I mean, the numbers tell a truly stunning story. In 1984, the Congress Party had this massive, incredible 415 seats in the Lok Sabha. Just 5 years later, in 1989, that number plummets all the way down to 197. That's more than half their power just gone, wiped out in a single election cycle. A political earthquake. So you have to understand, this wasn't just a bad day at the polls. For the Congress Party, it was like a political extinction event. This was the party that had been the center of India's political universe, like the sun in the solar system, ever since independence. And then, all of a sudden, it wasn't. The old order was completely shattered. Now, with that old power structure collapsing, a huge vacuum was created. And nature abhors a vacuum, right? Into that space rushed this incredibly powerful social movement that would completely redraw India's political map based on new and also very, very old social identities. To really get what happened next, we have to define a key term: the other backward classes, or OBCs. This is an official government category for communities who are seen as suffering from educational and social backwardness, but they're distinct from the other recognized groups like the scheduled castes and tribes. And the whole thing really came to a head over this one number, 27%. See, in 1990, the government decided to implement the Mandal Commission's recommendation, reserving 27% of central government jobs for these OBCs. That one decision, it was like a spark in a powder keg. It just ignited this massive, fiery, and often violent national debate. And the country was just split right down the middle. On one side, you had supporters who argued this was about social justice, about giving a huge part of the population a fair shot and a seat at the table. But on the other side, you had opponents who protested violently in many cities, arguing that the criteria were unfair and the whole thing was just tearing the country apart. Okay, so at the exact same time this huge debate over caste was raging, another really powerful force was on the rise. We're talking about the rise of Hindutva. This was a movement that was all about redefining the nation and its culture in a new way. And the absolute focal point for this movement became the Ayodhya dispute, which had been simmering for decades. You can see the key moments here. It all really kicked into high gear in 1986 when a court ordered the locks on the disputed structure to be opened. That basically lit a political fuse that led to a chain of events culminating in 1992 when the structure was demolished, an act that sent just massive shockwaves across the entire country. Now, fast forward a few decades. When the Supreme Court of India gave its final verdict on the land in 2019, it made a point to start by reaffirming a core principle of the Constitution. It said, quote, "Under our Constitution, citizens of all faiths, beliefs, and creeds are both subject to the law and equal before the law." But then the court also said this. It concluded, based on the evidence it had, that, quote, "The faith and belief of Hindus has always been that Janmastan of Lord Ram is the place where Babri Mosque has been constructed." So in the end, the final verdict allotted the land for the construction of a temple. So, while all these huge battles over social and religious identity were being fought out in the open, there was another revolution happening, a quieter one, but just as profound. India's entire economy was about to take a sharp, decisive turn. This was in 1991, when the country kicked off its new economic reforms. Now, this wasn't some minor tweak, it was a radical pivot, a complete change in direction, away from the state-controlled model India had followed since independence. And here's the really telling part. Every single government that has come to power since 1991, regardless of party, has pretty much stuck to this new economic path.
So let's recap. The old dominant party is gone. You've got these powerful new social and religious forces rising up. So what does actually governing look like in this new landscape? Well, in one word, complicated. Welcome to the era of coalitions.
I mean, this table just captures the political roller coaster of the 90s perfectly. It was basically a revolving door of governments. Just look at that first one, the National Front in 1989. This was a government that was supported from the outside by two groups that were bitter ideological enemies, the left parties and the BJP. It's wild. And that was the new reality, an age of unstable, often strange, but always pragmatic alliances. And this wasn't just a flash in the pan. Get this. For a full 25 years, from 1989 all the way to 2014, not a single political party managed to secure a clear majority in a national election. Not one. So building alliances, making coalitions, it wasn't just a strategy anymore. It was the only way to form a government. Okay, so we've talked about chaos, competition, constant instability. But here's where it gets really interesting. Out of all that churning, a kind of new consensus, a new set of rules for the game, started to emerge among most of the political parties. And this new consensus really rested on four main pillars. First, pretty much everyone got on board with the new economic policies. Second, the political and social claims of the backward castes, well, they became an accepted part of the political landscape. Third, everyone had to accept that powerful state-level parties were now major players in national governance. And fourth, it became clear that pragmatic alliances were way more important than sticking to pure ideology. So when you boil it all down, what's the big takeaway from this great churning of the 1990s? It's this. The entire political operating system of India got a complete rewrite. The era of one-party dominance was over. Social identity, both caste and religion, became central to how politics worked. Economic liberalization was here to stay. And power sharing through coalitions, that became the new normal. You know, a new consensus was born from all that chaos of the 90s, and it's pretty much defined Indian politics for decades. But that leaves us with one last question to think about. As India continues to evolve and change so rapidly, what will the next great churning bring?